Imagine standing on King Street in 1850. The air smells of horse manure and wood smoke. The streets are not paved with stone or brick. They are rivers of mud so deep that locals joke about men disappearing into them, swallowed whole with only their hats left floating on the surface. This is Toronto, a city of 30,000 souls clawing its way toward respectability in the British Empire. Just 1 year earlier, on April 7, 1849, a catastrophic fire had consumed the heart of the city, destroying St. James Cathedral, St. Lawrence Market, and 15 acres of the downtown core. But Torontonians are not people who dwell on disaster. Within months, construction begins on grander buildings, this time following new fire codes that demand brick and stone instead of the wooden structures that had burned so easily. Gas lamps now illuminate the main thoroughfares, a modern marvel that had arrived in 1841, and by 1852, more than 100 of these flickering sentinels line the streets, casting their pale yellow glow across the muddy avenues. The railways are coming. In 1853, the first locomotive steams into the city, connecting Toronto to the rich farmlands of southern Ontario and the timber forests to the north. The Grand Trunk Railway and the Northern Railway transform Union Station into a bustling gateway, and suddenly this provincial capital is no longer isolated. Immigrants pour in from Ireland, Scotland, and England, many fleeing famine and poverty, seeking new lives in this land of opportunity. By 1867, everything changes. The British North America Act creates the Dominion of Canada, and Toronto becomes the capital of the newly formed province of Ontario. The City of Mud now stands as a cornerstone of a nation. The new Dominion needs a metropolis, and Toronto answers the call with astonishing speed. In 1867, the population stands at 56,000. By 1891, it will surge past 180,000. A transformation so rapid, it reshapes every street, every neighborhood, every horizon. The railways are the arteries of this growth. The Grand Trunk Railway builds a magnificent Union Station in 1858, and trains arrive daily carrying immigrants, merchants, and dreamers from across the British Empire and beyond. Horse-drawn streetcars clatter along the cobblestones starting in 1861, carrying workers from the cramped boarding houses of the ward to the factories sprouting along the waterfront. The wealthy retreat to the rolling hills of Rosedale, building Victorian mansions with wraparound porches and manicured gardens, while the poor crowd into tenements where entire families share single rooms. In December of 1869, a young Irish immigrant named Timothy Eaton opens a small dry goods store at 178 Yonge Street. His revolutionary idea is simple but radical. One fixed price for every item, no haggling, no credit, and a money-back guarantee if the customer is not satisfied. By 1883, Eaton moves to larger premises, boasting the first electric lights in any Canadian store, and the shopping habits of an entire nation begin to change. The University of Toronto expands its campus, attracting scholars from across the continent. Banks rise along King Street, their stone facades proclaiming permanence and prosperity. Yet beneath this glittering progress, tensions simmer. Irish Catholics face discrimination and occasional violence from Protestant neighbors. The city is growing wealthy, but the wealth is not shared equally. As 1890 approaches, electricity is about to replace gas, and Toronto stands ready to leap into a new century. The city awakens to a new century, humming with electricity. In 1892, the horse-drawn streetcars that once clattered through the streets are replaced by electric trolleys, their overhead wires crackling with invisible energy. their bells announcing the arrival of modernity. Smokestacks rise along the waterfront and industrial districts, painting the sky gray with the exhaust of progress, and factory whistles mark the rhythms of working-class life. But the most profound transformation is happening in the crowded tenements of the Ward, that dense neighborhood near City Hall, where wave after wave of newcomers first set foot in Toronto. By 1900, approximately 3,000 Jewish immigrants have settled here, many fleeing persecution in Eastern Europe and Russia, and by 1913, that number will swell to over 32,000. They crowd into cramped houses, work in garment sweatshops along Spadina Avenue, and slowly begin drifting westward into the Victorian homes of Kensington, where they convert ground floors into shops selling pickled herring, live chickens, and kosher cheese. Italians follow, building their own community along College Street, their language and customs adding new colors to the city's increasingly complex tapestry. On a hilltop overlooking the growing metropolis, financier Sir Henry Pellet begins construction of Casa Loma in 1911, a Gothic castle with 98 rooms, secret passages, and an oven large enough to roast an ox. It costs $3.5 million and employs 300 workers for 3 years, a monument to ambition that will, ironically, become a symbol of hubris when Pellet loses everything. But in August of 1914, such troubles seem impossibly distant. Young men in Toronto are marching toward Union Station, volunteering for a war that everyone believes will be over by Christmas, their families waving flags and cheering. They are wrong. The Great War has begun. The Great War demands everything Toronto can give. Within weeks of Britain's declaration on August 4, 1914, thousands of young Torontonians rush to enlist, their patriotism fierce and unquestioning. The 3rd Battalion leaves from Union Station that same month, men packed into train cars bound for training camps in Quebec, and then the muddy trenches of France and Belgium. Back home, families display service flags in their windows. Women take factory jobs previously held only by men. And tag days raise millions for soldiers' families and Belgian refugees. The Toronto and York County Patriotic Fund collects $9.5 million to support 20,000 families left behind. But the telegrams arrive too, one after another, bearing news that no parent or wife wants to read. By the war's end in 1918, nearly 5,000 Torontonians will never return, their names eventually carved into the cenotaph unveiled at Old City Hall in 1925. Peace brings relief, but also restlessness. The 1920s roar into Toronto with jazz crackling through radio sets, automobiles replacing horse-drawn carriages, and women bobbing their hair and demanding the vote they finally receive in 1917 at the federal level. Prohibition casts a strange shadow over the decade, the Ontario Temperance Act banning alcohol sales from 1916 until 1927. Yet speakeasies thrive in basements and back rooms, and Americans cross the border seeking legal drinks they cannot find at home. The economy surges with new banks, new towers, new fortunes. In June of 1929, the magnificent Royal York Hotel opens its doors, 28 floors of Art Deco splendor, the tallest building in the British Commonwealth. Over 2,000 guests attend the gala opening. 4 months later, in October, the stock market collapses. The party is over. The crash arrives like a thief in the night. Banks close their doors. Factories fall silent. Men who once wore suits to offices now stand in lines stretching around city blocks, waiting for bread, waiting for soup, waiting for something, anything, to feed their families. Toronto, like every other city on the continent, is brought to its knees by the Great Depression. People sleep in parks and public restrooms. Families lose their homes, their savings, their dignity. And yet, even in the darkest hours, Torontonians find small escapes. On summer afternoons, hundreds of thousands flock to Sunnyside Amusement Park on the lakeshore, where for a few pennies they can ride roller coasters, swim in the world's largest outdoor pool, and forget, if only for a moment, the troubles that await them back home. The Palais Royal Ballroom offers dancing and music, a brief respite from the relentless grind of poverty. Slowly, painfully, the city begins to recover, jobs returning one by one, hope flickering back to life. Then, in September 1939, war returns to the world. Once again, young Canadians answer the call. This time, Toronto transforms itself into an arsenal of democracy. At the GECO munitions plant in Scarborough, 20,000 workers, most of them women, labor around the clock 6 days a week, filling over 256 million shells and fuses. They handle explosives with steady hands, remove their hairpins to prevent sparks, and work with such care that not a single worker loses their life during 3 years of dangerous production. At Victory Aircraft in Malton, Lancaster bombers roll off the assembly line at the rate of 1 per day. By 1943, over 250,000 women work in Canadian war factories, earning wages nearly equal to men. On May 8, 1945, church bells ring across Toronto. The war in Europe is over. Soldiers will soon come home, and a new question emerges: what kind of city will welcome them? The veterans return, and they want everything the Depression and the war denied them. They want houses with yards where children can play. They want cars parked in driveways. They want the promise of a better life, and Toronto rushes to provide it. The baby boom explodes across the city, hospitals overflowing with newborns, schools struggling to keep pace with enrollment, and the old urban core suddenly feeling impossibly cramped. In 1953, industrialist E.P. Taylor breaks ground on Don Mills, a revolutionary planned community northeast of the city, featuring curving streets, cul-de-sac, a central shopping plaza, and a careful mix of houses, apartments, and industry, all within 2,000 acres of carefully designed space. It becomes the blueprint for suburban development across Canada, and soon similar neighborhoods sprout in every direction, pushing the city's boundaries further and further into the farmland that once surrounded it. The infrastructure struggles to keep up. In 1954, Toronto opens Canada's first subway line, running beneath Yonge Street from Union Station to Eglinton Avenue. A marvel of engineering that carries passengers in minutes, what once took an hour by streetcar. That same year, the provincial government creates Metropolitan Toronto, a new regional authority joining the city with 12 surrounding municipalities to coordinate planning, transit, and services for a population that has already surpassed 1 million and shows no signs of slowing. The Gardiner Expressway rises along the waterfront, cutting through old neighborhoods to feed the suburban appetite for automobiles. Immigrants arrive in waves, Portuguese settling along Dundas Street, Greeks establishing Greektown on the Danforth, Italians building Little Italy along College Street. By 1967, as Canada celebrates its centennial with Expo in Montreal, Toronto looks outward with newfound confidence, ready to prove it deserves to be called a world city. The world is changing, and Toronto changes with it. In 1967, the federal government lifts racial quotas from immigration policy, replacing them with a points system based on skills and education rather than country of origin. Before this moment, 90% of Canadian immigrants came from Europe. Within a generation, that number will reverse entirely. Toronto, as the nation's largest port of entry, feels this transformation immediately and profoundly. Chinese families settle along Spadina Avenue. Caribbean communities establish themselves in neighborhoods across the city. South Asians build new enclaves. Latin Americans add their voices to the growing chorus. In 1967, the first Caravana Festival celebrates West Indian culture with a parade that will eventually become the largest Caribbean carnival in North America, drawing over 1 million visitors each summer. The city's population surpasses 2 million by 1971, and the phrase cultural mosaic begins replacing the old American metaphor of the melting pot. In 1968, urban activist Jane Jacobs moves to Toronto from New York, bringing with her a fierce opposition to expressways that destroy neighborhoods for the sake of automobiles. She joins local residents fighting the proposed Spadina Expressway, and in 1971, Ontario Premier Bill Davis halts construction, declaring that if we are building a transportation system to serve people, the Spadina Expressway is a good place to stop. Meanwhile, rising above the railway lands south of downtown, workers complete the CN Tower in 1976, a concrete needle 553 meters tall, the world's tallest freestanding structure. It becomes an instant symbol of Toronto's ambition, visible from every corner of the city, a declaration that this provincial capital has arrived on the world stage. The music scene explodes with bands like Rush, and Toronto begins to see itself not as a quiet British outpost, but as a cosmopolitan metropolis ready to compete with any city on Earth. Glass towers rise along Bay Street, their reflective facades multiplying the skyline into infinite versions of itself. Toronto in the 1990s is a city in perpetual motion, cranes swinging overhead, construction sites humming day and night, ambition written in steel and concrete. The film industry flourishes, earning the city its nickname Hollywood North, as American productions discover that Toronto's streets can double for New York, Chicago, or any other metropolis at a fraction of the cost. The Toronto International Film Festival, established in 1976, grows into the second most important festival in the world after Cannes, drawing stars and directors from every continent each September. BCE Place rises downtown, its spectacular galleria, designed by Spanish architect Santiago Calatrava, becoming an instant landmark. The Sky Dome, later renamed Rogers Centre, opens in 1989 as the world's first stadium with a fully retractable roof, home to the Blue Jays, who will win back-to-back World Series championships in 1992 and 93. But the most dramatic transformation comes from Queen's Park, not from developers. On January 1, 1998, the provincial government dissolves metropolitan Toronto and merges its 6 constituent municipalities into a single megacity. The decision is wildly unpopular, with over 3/4 of voters rejecting it in a referendum, yet the government proceeds anyway. Overnight, Toronto becomes the 5th largest city in North America, trailing only Mexico City, New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. The former cities of Scarborough, North York, Etobicoke, York, and East York vanish from official maps, absorbed into a unified Toronto that now stretches across 630 square kilometers. Critics warn of lost neighborhood identity and ballooning bureaucracy. Supporters promise efficiency and global competitiveness. As the millennium approaches, Toronto stands at a crossroads, larger and more powerful than ever, yet uncertain about what kind of city it wants to become. The new millennium arrives, and Toronto discovers it has become something remarkable without quite realizing when the transformation occurred. The United Nations now recognizes it as one of the most diverse cities on the planet, a place where over 200 ethnic origins coexist, where 140 languages fill the air, where more than half the population was born outside Canada. Walk down any street and you hear Mandarin, Tagalog, Portuguese, Urdu, Spanish, Cantonese, all woven together in a symphony of human migration. The condo towers multiply so rapidly that construction cranes become as familiar as streetcars, each new glass spire adding another layer to a skyline that seems to reinvent itself every season. The Path, that subterranean network of tunnels connecting downtown buildings, expands into one of the largest underground shopping complexes in the world. A city beneath the city where office workers move through climate-controlled corridors regardless of the brutal winters above. The economy diversifies beyond finance into technology, film, education, and healthcare. The Toronto International Film Festival cements the city's reputation as a cultural capital. The financial crisis of 2008 strikes hard, but Toronto recovers faster than most North American cities, its banks more cautious than their American counterparts, its real estate market seemingly immune to gravity. Housing prices climb relentlessly, doubling and then tripling, transforming homeownership from expectation into aspiration for an entire generation. And then, in June of 2019, something magical happens. The Toronto Raptors, a basketball team as diverse as the city itself, led by players from Cameroon, Congo, and across North America, win the NBA championship, the first title for any team outside the United States. 2 million people flood the streets for the victory parade, a celebration of sport, diversity, and civic pride that captures the world's attention. The years of 2020 and 21 test every city on Earth, and Toronto is no exception. Global health challenges empty the downtown towers, silence the theaters, shutter the restaurants that once hummed with conversation until midnight. Streets that carried millions of commuters fall quiet. Yet, even in the stillness, the city adapts. Patios spring up on parking lanes and sidewalks, cyclists claim roads once dominated by automobiles, neighbors who never spoke discover community in their own backyards. The recovery reveals new priorities. Permanent bike lanes appear where temporary ones once stood. Public spaces are reimagined, expanded, celebrated as essential rather than optional. The housing crisis, already severe, intensifies into a defining challenge of the era, with prices and rents pushing working families further from the core, forcing difficult conversations about density, affordability, and what kind of city Toronto wants to become. Yet the building continues, grander and more ambitious than ever. The Portland's transformation progresses, a $1 billion project creating a naturalized river channel for the Don, New Parkland, and an entirely new neighborhood called Villiers Island, rising from reclaimed industrial wasteland. The Ontario Line, a 15-kilometer rapid transit corridor, breaks ground with promises of better connections across a sprawling metropolis. In 2026, Toronto celebrates 2 centuries since its incorporation as a city, a milestone that invites reflection on how far this place has traveled. From the muddy streets of 1850 to the glass towers of today, from 30,000 residents to nearly 3 million, from a provincial British outpost to one of the most multicultural cities humanity has ever built, Toronto has proven that cities are not static monuments, but living organisms, constantly changing, constantly challenged, constantly reinventing themselves for whatever comes next.